Hello and welcome to On the Right Track Career Stories, a video series and podcast about real people, their real careers, and real lives. I'm Jane Christopher, your host, and today I'm talking to Leigh Tynan. She's an entrepreneur. She's got lots of balls in the air. Let's listen to her very interesting life. How are you, Leigh?
I'm good, thanks, Jane. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Now, why don't we just get started? Tell us what you do.
It's not a short answer. I do a few things. It started as a career in photography, which grew into I have a company that does content creation, so photography, video, and a bit of creative direction, called Tynan Studio. From that, about 3 years ago, I started working with a food startup, which has actually turned out to be the fastest food startup in Canadian history, Love Good Fats. I've grown into becoming their creative director. So I manage all the content creation and sort of creative direction for the strategy for that company. And then the other sort of unexpected, career path that I've taken is I took over a business from my dad that distributes Gilbert rugby products in Canada. So if you are a rugby player, you know Gilbert. It is the best rugby ball in the world. It's the Rugby World Cup ball. Every professional sports team plays with it. So I wasn't a rugby player, but I was a high performance athlete. So that kind of made it seem like a good fit. So I have sort of three things that I do, which I guess coming from a background as a triathlete suits me because I like to do different things. But I would say like kind of high level, I'm an entrepreneur. And I think I have gravitated towards creating things, and I'm someone who likes to make things, and I have a good eye. But a lot of that actually is creativity, not just in aesthetic, but also in problem solving in terms of the different businesses that I have. So,
okay, so how did all of this come to be?
Even in high school, I was a good student. I was very academic. I liked school. I love learning. I went to university for kinesiology. Not because I was necessarily interested in sports science, but because I was an athlete myself and my parents wanted me to have a degree that was not, I think they felt that a degree like kinesiology or science would have more to fall back on somehow than an arts degree. And so I did an undergrad and then I went to grad school for kinesiology. My thesis there was on the design of public recreation space and accessibility for different user groups. And so I figured out a way to be able to take some undergrad photography classes while I was in grad school, so that I could take pictures of the pools. And that's how I had always loved photography, but that's sort of how I really got into that. I would say for me, the thing that was hard was that even coming to the end of undergrad, I had no idea what I wanted to do. My friends were all becoming, phys ed teachers, massage therapists, occupational therapists, doctors, and none of it interested me. And so it was quite stressful. I think my parents looked at me and said, well, like, why don't you go to law school? I wrote the LSAT and then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not very combative. I don't think I could sort of make a career out of debate and argument. So yeah, in grad school, while I was taking this photography class, I started apprenticing with some photographers. And I just show up on the weekends at their house, and they did beautiful wedding photography. And I just like hold a reflector or set out the drinks. And I think probably that was something that really taught me, in terms of a career path and trying to figure it out, like you really don't know until you try something. And that was the first time I'd actually tried it, and I loved it. Like I just loved it. And so that's kind of how it started, right? As I began apprenticing with different people and took a couple classes here and there, but no professional training. I mean, photography is very much a career that you learn on the job. And so that was, I think, a big thing that I realized is all through undergrad, like I was just so focused on school, but I wasn't actually trying anything in terms of different career opportunities. So yeah, that's how
So you were apprenticing on the side. What does that mean? Like, was it a part-time job? Where would you get the idea to spend your weekends doing that?
I just started. So my professor in grad school had said to me one day, what is it that you want to do? And I thought she was asking me about my thesis. And I started saying, okay, well, I'm thinking of, and she's like, no, like, what do you want to do? Like with your life, and I was like, I think I want to be a photographer. And I mean, she is a person who really in my life, created a pivot, because she said, there's these people that photographed. There's another, student in grad school. She had a wedding last summer and the photographers were awesome. They were so fun, and why don't you see if you could go and meet with them? And I remember, like, I still, to Jane, to this day, I remember phoning them. Like, I was terrified. It was just, it was the professor sort of, she made the connection, and then I made the phone call. And then once I had done that, I lived in New York for a little while, and I did the same thing. I just emailed people and said, I'll work for free. I just want to learn.
Okay, so let me get this straight again. You go to undergrad, kinesiology, you do graduate work, you write the LSAT, and at the same time you're interning for photography and you're working for free, you're learning. Then what? How do you start making money?
I'm trying to think of, what I think, honestly, there's a Starbucks in Forest Hill Village in Toronto that people used to put their photos up in. And I just went and asked if I could put my pictures up there. And, there was a waiting list. So I think I had to probably wait like 6 months or something. And then when my photos are up on the wall there, I had pictures of kids and dogs and different things. And a couple families contacted me to do photography. So those were like my first clients. I mean, the learning how to make a living as, initially the business was a portrait photography business and a family photography business. It's a tough business to make money at. There's a high level of customer service expected. There's a high level of quality. And people are spending a lot of money on family photography. But if you only, if you can only manage taking on like 100 clients in a year, it's by the time you cover all your overhead, like, it was a big learning for me. And I think actually, as I've moved into as my business has evolved, really having to figure out how to be profitable has made it so much easier now.
So how has it evolved?
So the family photography business, what happened was, people would say, the parents would say, oh, I've got some staff pictures. Like, would you come to my office and take pictures of, my law firm, or, I work at a bank and we're having a golf tournament. And so we started doing headshots at places. And over time, I started to realize the headshots were actually much more profitable than going on a weekend, meeting a family, spending 2 hours with them, editing all the pictures, having them come in, like the amount of time that was taking. And then also, I mean, the big pivot in that business, because I did that for seven years, the big pivot was we got invited after shooting a golf tournament to go and do an incentive trip for a bank. And so they bring the bankers down somewhere beautiful, and we're going to go take photos. And so we did that 1 year, and I went by myself and did like a photo slideshow at the end. And I worked like, 17-hour days for 4 or 5 days in somewhere nice. It was probably in like Cayman Islands or somewhere. I never even saw the beach. And then the next year I said, okay, that was a lot of work. I need to bring someone with me to help. And then the following year we said, well, these cameras that we shoot with take video. So maybe we'll try shooting a video instead of a slideshow, which was like baptism by scalding fire. Like, we had no idea what we were doing. But I have a great team. Like, the people I work with are amazing. And I don't think we slept, but we figured it out. And on the last day, we showed this awesome video, and everybody went crazy for it. And then that part of the bank, showed it to some other part of the bank. And the next thing you know, we're doing like 6 of these every winter on these, and that was really how it turned into a video business. Around the same time I had my daughter, and I just didn't want to be working in the evenings and on weekends. I wanted to spend time with her. I didn't want to be with other people's kids on a Saturday morning. And so it was kind of a natural progression. So that's how the business Tynan Studio turned into sort of more commercial video and photography. From there, though, I mean, I would say the businesses I love working with, we do a lot of stuff with hospital foundations and nonprofits. And that has been amazing because you get to meet the coolest people. You get to tell really interesting stories. And I think by that point, photography had become a little two-dimensional for me. And I wanted to have ability to do more storytelling. And so that's the kind of stuff I feel like for me, that is, I would say I'm not a passionate filmmaker, but I do love telling stories and I love meeting people. So, doing things with a hospital foundation where you can tell a story about a patient, like a patient that's had a great outcome, or some doctors that have been super innovative and come up with an incredible way to sort of solve a problem. And then those are often used at fundraising events. And so that for me is like, I feel like if we can take our, like if I get my business, my team, we can take our skill set and tell a great story and it impacts people on an emotional level and they make a donation. That's like for me the coolest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things you'd ask about what is your why, that I was thinking that for me really is a big why is to tell stories that matter in a way that they actually make like a meaningful impact. It would sort of offer an ability for a charity to raise a bunch of money and do some really cool work. So that's how Tynan Studio kind of.
Okay, so you really have the spirit of an entrepreneur. You had a spark for photography, creativity, and this is not your educational background, and you just made a career happen. Can you talk to the audience a little bit about being an entrepreneur and some of the pros and cons or good and bad of that lifestyle?
So I think because it's the way that I went, I actually really see way more upside than down. I grew up in a family business. My dad was an entrepreneur. It's interesting, like as an adult, I've realized I probably have ADHD, but I mean, I can go really deep on things I'm interested in, and the rest of the stuff is just kind of. And actually, you know, when I read a little bit about this, entrepreneurs are much more likely to have this personality profile that I have, and but it means that I can focus on the things I'm good at. I can delegate to other people the stuff that's not my strength. I like to know that my workplace is going to be positive. It's going to be supportive. I've never been a clock in, clock out person. So, you know, we eat what we kill. That's an expression. I always think as an entrepreneur, you sort of like, you bring in the money, and then once you've paid your business rent and all your expenses and your staff, whatever's left is for you, which in a lot of ways, I guess people think is risky, but I don't know. I've just never seen it that way. I'm not scared of hard work. But I also don't want to be stuck at a desk because, you know, it's like not 5 o'clock yet. I had a job in university running a pool, and the person who was the manager of like the whole complex was very much a like, come to your desk and say, well, what are you doing right now? And I just never, it really rubbed me the wrong way early on. And I think maybe growing up with my dad being an entrepreneur, it just
in your blood. And
yeah, which I didn't realize when I was younger, you know.
So Leigh, you said you don't like to clock in and clock out. That's not your personality. As an entrepreneur, it's hard to create boundaries with life, personal life, and work. How many hours do you work in a week? Do you have time off on the weekends? Like what kind of holidays do you have? 3 businesses.
Yeah. So years ago, I met this person who was a business coach. And actually, you know, over the years, I've tried different things like that, because when you don't have like a career path or mentor, like you don't have like an official, like, oh, this person's ahead of me in their career and that's where I want to go. Like when you work for yourself and you take an unconventional path, that sometimes is hard to figure out. So anyhow, there's one business coach I work with. He gave me this nugget, which has really stuck with me, where he asked me to write down he had these little business cards. You write down 3 goals, right? And so at the time, there was a goal that was, I wanted to have, 5 weeks vacation, 5 weeks paid vacation. I wanted to it was a certain amount of money, and I wanted to own a commercial building for my business. And all 3 things seemed absolutely ridiculously impossible. And he said, you just write them down and you put it in your wallet. And it took about 7 years to get there. Okay. And so now I have the building that my business is in, I own, and which was a big goal of mine, because that's sort of a retirement plan. And I have the 5 weeks vacation, and and actually, to be honest, I don't even know if I take 5 weeks. I just take whatever works around what needs to be done, but it's at least 5 weeks. I used to work 7 days a week. As time goes on and you get the right people working with you, and you also prioritize like what actually do you need to do to move the needle. I mean, I have a young daughter, a school-age child. I've been able to, you know, be at her, all kinds of stuff for her. And I don't work on weekends. I think early on I had my business was in my spare bedroom. I worked all the time. I mean, I was in my pajamas, but I was still working all the time, which again, it's like we've come full circle at the moment. But now, I mean, I really work like the thing that's been tricky having a child is I'm the most productive and the most efficient in terms of how my brain works early in the morning. So I used to be at my desk at 8 o'clock, and between like sort of 8 and 9:30 is when all the good thinking happens. Now that's kind of impossible. I hasn't since my daughter's been born. That sort of, you're getting her to school, you're getting her breakfast, whatever. So I found that I've kind of lost that. I do a lot of work thinking when I'm running in the morning. But no, I mean, 4 o'clock is kind of, if I have to work past 4 o'clock these days, I'm like, whew, because I've just prioritized. I mean, that's part of being an entrepreneur, is prioritizing that you want to have a life outside of work.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So,
okay. So students who are watching who want to be entrepreneurs, what can you tell them to work on? What skills do they need?
certainly if you want to be creative, like, I think there's a sort of, sometimes there's a misnomer. Being creative is an opportunity to be like flaky and not show up and not be sort of organized. That is one thing I would say. You have to be, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you got to hold yourself accountable, and you can't make excuses. Like, you have to be an optimist and a realist at the same time. And, trying something, I would say you really need to be passionate about it, because it's going to be a lot of work, and there's going to be a lot of time where other people might think you're nuts. And so I think you need the discipline in yourself, because you're not being held to someone else's, reward or accolades, right? I mean, that can come later. Like, once you're a success, everybody thinks it's a great idea. But when you're starting out, people are kind of like, oh, like I worked full time 4 years and did not get paid because I was covering the cost of renovating a studio and buying camera equipment. And so, you have like kind of all this upfront expenses. You're showing up for work every day. I remember when I started paying myself $300 a week, it was like, this is like a big deal, right? And so I think, and I also had to be willing to like work at a bar on the side, do tutoring on the side. So I think the long-term payoff is amazing. You just need to be very realistic at the front end. It's not, you're going to make less money in the start and have less freedom. But if you can make a go of it, I think you have incredible upside.
Excellent. Okay. So where do you see your business or yourself or your career in 5 years?
So I actually have a goal of being able to just do work not tied to income. So I've written down, because I redid my goals.
Love that.
On the piece of paper now, is to have passive income. So I'm sort of, through the building, I don't know, I'm sort of trying to figure that out, how I manage that through some maybe other investment properties. I'm not really, again, I've put it out to the universe. So again, I think that's a big thing, is like putting things out there and being open to things, opportunities coming up, and saying yes to things. So passive income, so that I can do work that's not tied to making money, is a goal. So that is one piece. And then the other thing, I'm a big cyclist. I really love cycling. So I have this sports distribution business in a sport that is rugby is an incredible sport, but it's not a game I ever played. So I would like to figure out a way to parlay some element of that business into cycling, so that I can find a reason to be at the Tour de France.
I'm sure.
The business expense.
I'm sure you're going to make all of this happen. Seriously. Okay. So what would you tell your younger self?
Yeah, I think, it took me a while, and it's only in reflection you realize these things, but it's to try stuff, to try different things, and to be less afraid, because I was, I spent a lot of time feeling like the world was passing me by, like, oh, I'm a loser. Like, all my friends have gone on to the next thing, and I have no idea what to do. So I think maybe I'd be a little kinder to myself about that. The time that I had that was idle, I should have been going to art galleries, and not like, when I lived in New York City and I worked at a bar at night, and for photographers, the days I had off, I was so worried about trying to figure out what I was going to do. I think I would tell myself to enjoy that more. And then I think, your parents' opinions are important. My parents were, I moved here from Ireland when I was 7. I'm one of 4 kids. I've got a doctor, a lawyer, and a PR consultant in my family. And then there's me. And I was just never I'm like the wild horse that was never going to go in the barn. And I felt like, my parents really wanted me to have a professional degree. I think now they think it's great, but I guess that's the part, is like, you have to be willing. If you're going to try something a little different, it's going to be uncomfortable for everybody, including your parents.
Yes.
And I think the thing that they need is, like, for my parents, once I had the master's degree, they got off my case because they're like, she's something to fall back on, right? So I think it's just, that's the other piece, right? Is understanding that the people in your family want the best for you. And this is like a scary thing to do. And so they may not be as supportive as you need them to be, but that's also okay. Like, as long as you're paying your own bills and being accountable to yourself.
Okay, last question, Leigh. Thanks so much for everything you've shared.
Yeah, this is awesome.
What would you be doing if you weren't an entrepreneur?
I did want to be a professor, actually. And that was when I was in grad school. I love academics. I actually think, like, I am a magnet for women with PhDs. I have so many girlfriends that have PhDs. So I feel like maybe when I retire, I will go and get a PhD. I just love being in school.
There's something to do.
Yeah, I love being in school and I love learning. It's just, I also feel like I'm very practically oriented. And so that's, yeah, maybe that. Or I also really love renovating. And so I also have this, like, daydream, if I'm not on boards when I'm retired, I might be working in Home Depot in the electrical department.
Love it.
People, yeah, those are my other options.
Well, what a great conversation. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Certainly interesting and unique. And you love what you do. You're very successful. So thank you for sharing, Leigh. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, no, and thanks for having me, Jane. It's such a great idea. Honestly, I think kids really like it, to know that there's other options than just the sort of set professional degrees, which is what I think a lot of people, that's all you see. And there's just so much more out there. You can kind of make your own path. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll chat soon. See you later, Leigh.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. If you liked what you saw, give us a like, and even better, subscribe. Hope to see you soon.